Ducks don't draw, but that's only because they already know exactly what they want to be in life, which is a duck. And I envy that about them. Hey, my name is Stephanie, and I am here to tell you about my most embarrassing moment as an artist and what I eventually learned from it 7 years later. And while I do that, I'm going to draw a bird-themed page in my sketchbook. So, let's get going. So I'm going to start here by just loosely sketching things in pencil, and then I'm going to go in with the pen after that. For anyone who doesn't follow Simone Grunewald, I practiced this. She also goes by Schmo Draws. I'll link her down below. But she does these weekly prompts for sketchbook practice as part of her cozy art club. And though I don't often get around to them, I do like drawing birds. So today I saw the opportunity to draw while I talk. So let me set the stage. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Chris Oatley, but there was a time when he was the name in art podcasts, especially if you were hoping to get into viz dev or really any form of visual storytelling, which was always his main focus. He does still make videos here on YouTube, albeit at a slower pace, which again I'll link down below. And it looks from his website like he's planning on reviving some of his online courses and mentorships, which I'm sure I'll be following. But about 7 years ago, Chris Oatley was in his prime as far as, being a public figure in the art education space. He was offering courses on painting and personal projects and breaking into the industry, and monthly memberships with exclusive podcasts. And he had this really thriving art community. And I took, or at least started, most of these courses. My follow-through wasn't great back then, which will come into play later. But I took some of his classes on storytelling, and I did a concept art mentorship that went through the Oatley Academy, and I even went to CTNX as part of the community a couple times, obviously before the whole convention fell into disrepute. And I listened to his podcast religiously. There were older episodes I could almost recite by heart. So around the end of 2016, going into 2017, I get an email from Chris Oatley. And he'd been working on a special podcast series for a while at that point. A paywalled one for people taking his classes, separate from the Chris Oatley Artcast that was his mainline offering. But it was called Escape from Art Jail. Now, the concept of art jail is probably familiar to a lot of artists, and it's where you see yourself, and you see the kind of work you want to be doing, and you see this gap between you, right? And you're working to try to bridge that gap, but you just can't quite figure out how. And maybe you're even working an art-related job. At the time, I was working as a sign artist for your favorite South Pacific Island-themed grocery store, and it was a job that had the potential to be so much fun, which was what always killed me about it. But due to extraneous reasons with the company and coworkers and managers, it felt a lot like art jail. But they've been producing this podcast for a while at this point, and I get this email saying that as part of this series, they wanted to feature some case studies of students looking to break into various parts of the art industry. They had one person trying to get into comics and another who wanted to be a creature designer, and the idea was that they were looking for people on the cusp of being professionals, who just needed maybe a bit of mentoring to make it those final few feet. And they asked me if I would like to be their visual development case study. Yes. Yes, I would love that. I mean, listen, I'm freaking out. Right? I'm over the moon. I have been packing loaves of ciabatta bread into paper bags at 7 a.m. every morning, listening to the Chris Oatley Artcast on my headphones, and just imagining myself on that podcast someday. Like what would I say during the interview and what would be my story? And this wasn't exactly that, but maybe someday they'd have me back on for the real deal to talk about how I'd finally made it, right? And there's also this whole other aspect of senpai noticed me happening in my mind. But more than that, it's senpai noticed me and thought I was pre-professional. From what he could see, I just needed a little push to make it the rest of the way to a legitimate job. Now, I didn't expect this to be my big break or anything, and I don't think it was in the end for any of the other case studies either. The ones I've followed since then have made it into their respective careers and gone on to do some cool things. But they've also gone through the same highs and lows getting there that most artists do in their careers. I also knew that even though this was a Chris Oatley podcast, it was the paywalled podcast. So realistically, it had limited scope and listeners. But I really wasn't looking for fame out of this experience anyway, because what I lacked the most at this point in my life, and what I hoped Chris Oatley could provide, was clarity. Because I did want to work in visual development. At the time, I think my ultimate goal was to be a color stylist for an animated TV show, which to my knowledge meant starting probably as a background painter. But I'd also had a baby about halfway through 2016, and I wasn't sure yet how I wanted to balance career and parenting at that point. Because with TV animation especially, my understanding is that you go through these periods of crunch where the outside world and potentially your young children just might not see you. And I also knew that my art skills weren't quite up to where I needed them to be to land that job in the first place. But every time I worked on building my skills, I felt like I should be making art. And every time I made art, I was frustrated by my lack of skill. And I had a full-time job and a baby, so the time I had to do anything was limited to begin with. But if it was going to take me a while to build those skills and apply for those jobs, should I also be looking into freelance? And I'd sold out Artist Alley a couple times. Was that still worth pursuing? And I knew I should be more intentional about my social media accounts. And I'd also always kind of been interested in children's book illustration. And I don't know if it's obvious by this point that I do have ADHD, but I just had this tangled up brain where I couldn't decide on a direction. And so I had no direction, and my energy and efforts were coming out of me in these sporadic bursts that weren't moving me anywhere. So I decided, whatever Chris Oatley tells me to do, that's what I'm going to do. He has the experience and the outside perspective to know what I need, so he's going to point, and I'm going to run. So I respond to the email, I say yes, and I tell my friends and my coworker, who also makes signs at the South Pacific Island-themed grocery store, shout out to Courtney, and I tell my mom, and I'm just so excited, right? I get put in a Facebook group with Chris and the other case studies, so we're getting to know each other and sharing resources, and every couple weeks or so, one of us has our interview. So eventually, it's my turn, and if I remember right, we started off by having sort of a pre-interview meeting, where we could introduce our background and our struggles and our goals, and give Chris something to work off of, something to plan for. And I tried to organize my thoughts before that, which went about as well as everything I just said, tangled brain. But I did my best, and I don't really know if I remember this meeting accurately. It might have been better than I remember it. It possibly might have been worse, but my recollection is that I basically exploded all over him during the meeting, messy style, like all of my confusion and insecurity and doubt. I just sort of laid it all out in front of him and was like, what should I do? Tell me what to do. And Chris really is a nice guy. He wrapped up the meeting like, thank you, I need to get this organized with my team, we'll get back to you. And he did get back to me with an email that basically said, we're really sorry. We thought you wanted to work in visual development. And the purpose of my case study was to provide guidance for other aspiring VizDev artists to learn from. So they decided I maybe wasn't the best fit for that after all, and they were going to find another artist to take my place in the series. Now, on a logical level, I knew this wasn't anything personal, or really even an indictment against me as a person or an artist. Chris was just trying to make an educational product that would achieve a specific goal within his community, and my situation wasn't the best to showcase that. But that still didn't change my deep instinctual reaction, which was that when I read through that email, I thought, oh, I tricked Chris Oatley. He thought that I had my life together, and I was maybe even on the verge of being a professional, but now he has realized, with a capital R. And maybe I'm too much of a mess for Chris Oatley to fix. And maybe I'm too much of a mess for anyone or anything. And it was all just kind of the ultimate confirmation of imposter syndrome. Like, I don't even know if you call it imposter syndrome at that point, because I really was the imposter. They had thought I was a dedicated, aspiring visual development artist, and then after actually speaking to me, determined that I wasn't that after all. And I wanted to respond back like, no. I'm an aspiring VizDev artist. Forget all that other stuff. If you tell me that's what I should do, I will be the most aspiring VizDev artist ever. But I didn't, I just said, I'm really sorry it couldn't work out, and thank you for your time. They did a lot of last-minute shuffling in the background and replaced me with Dan Kelby, who I really do wish him well. That sounded so resentful. No, he was an aspiring character designer, and it looks like, I just looked him up, and it looks like he has a character design course on Domestika now, so maybe I'll link that down below, or take it one of these days. But, sorry. But basically I went back to normal life, right? Kind of tail between my legs, packing ciabatta into paper bags at 7 a.m, which I would have been doing anyways, but this time it kind of felt bad, and I really couldn't listen to the Artcast for a while. I had to find another podcast. And I had to tell my mom and my friends and my coworker at the South Pacific Island-themed grocery store that it all had fallen through, which sucked. And I just felt bad, like deeper in the hole than ever. And I kind of didn't know what to do with that experience. I didn't really know where to put it. Like even now with all the perspective of time and experience, just gathering my notes for this video, I almost couldn't believe the amount of shame that resurfaced and just regret at the opportunity missed, even if it wasn't exactly right for me at that time. But I mean, it's been 7 years since then, right? Surely I've learned from the experience and grown and moved on. Well, let's talk about it. Okay, so let me outline how the rest of this video is going to go. And spoiler alert, we are ending things on an upward note because it is literally illegal for a video to be a downer when I have spent the vast majority of it drawing birds. And I'm going to set the stage again, only this time it's me from a couple weeks back. And after that, we're going to talk about how to take your first steps when you don't know what steps to take. Because even though there are similarities between the me of 7 years ago and the me of today, as well as some familiar pitfalls that I can see myself starting to fall into, there are enough differences this time around that I don't feel trapped in the same way that I used to. I just need to course correct. So if you, like me, have fallen into this hole and you don't know what to do, you see options and potential and you're constantly in motion trying to make things happen, but you don't know what to do, then first of all, drop that in the comments and we can commiserate together. And then take my metaphorical hand, because we are going to, if I may steal the term, escape from art jail together. So let me set the stage for me in the present. I have 2 kids now, not just the one, and money is tight. Not desperate, but tight. Now, I don't have a full-time job right now, mostly because the kind of jobs I'm likely to find where I live and with my experience would barely be worth it after childcare. But I've tried a few side hustles here and there, and I'm to the point where I'm ready to give my art career an honest go. Other people are making it work, and I don't even need a full-time income up front, just enough to give us some financial breathing room. So I start making plans to open up an online shop. Though I do still have a toddler at home, and my husband often works late, so I'm frustrated at the pace at which things are progressing, especially as I have to start paying for things like paper and shipping labels and envelopes. I've also signed up for an Artist Alley table this September, which is more money down, but that's what tax returns are for, right? So at least by prepping for a shop opening, I'm pulling double duty by prepping for Artist Alley at the same time. Except, should I really be doing Artist Alleys? My art's a good fit for them, and I've had decent success in the past, but there aren't many nearby, so I'm going to have to travel, and it's hard taking weekends away. Maybe I should focus on art fairs. We have more of those in my area. Maybe I should focus on wholesale and forget events entirely. Maybe I should do events and wholesale and an online shop. They say you need streams of income, and I have what I think is a good idea for a line of greeting cards. I still have that children's book manuscript that I wrote a few years back. Maybe I should make a book dummy and portfolio and shop around for an agent? That's a lot of work with no immediate return on investment though, so I should probably start the shop first. Maybe I should kickstart some enamel pins. Maybe I should start a YouTube channel. I always wanted to start one, and it takes time to build a following, so the sooner I get that going, the better. And it's fun. It's terrifying, but I like it, and I have all these plans for the future and videos I want to make. But I'm also on the treadmill now because you want to be consistent with your YouTube channel. And I'm still learning how to use the editing software and realizing that to make the kinds of videos I want to make, I might need to figure out After Effects. And my art skills are still not where I want them to be, but I don't know how to find the time to study and improve, but it's slowing down the actual art making when I have to keep correcting a figure or scrapping a painting. I have ramped up my social media presence to various degrees of effectiveness, but my efforts feel scattered, which makes sense because I feel scattered, and I kind of want to just stop it all for a minute to figure out who I even am as an artist, except I have all these freaking envelopes. So I should probably definitely open the shop first. And the house is falling apart around me, and I can't fully catch my breath sometimes, or start to spiral when I stand still for too long. But maybe I can make a video about that. Oh, maybe I can make a video about my most embarrassing moment as an artist. That's a good hook. And I can talk about that time in my life when I had all these possibilities, but felt paralyzed because I didn't know what to do. And finally, it hits me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm here again. I'm back in the same place. So, I did a lot of self-reflection over the next few days. You could call it moping. If my life was a movie, I would have been walking on a dock, staring out over the ocean. But I don't have any oceans nearby, so instead I had to walk to the mailbox and back a couple times. And for the first couple days, there was this definite air of despair. I was like, how has it been 7 years and I haven't made any progress? Then the rest of my brain caught up to me, and I was like, no, that's silly. I didn't just spend 7 years sitting on my hands. Maybe the things I did during that time didn't directly translate into art career, but just the process of living life helped me grow and set me up to respond differently to my challenges this time around. And at the end of this video, I'll make a case for the things you can learn during that time spent lost in the fog. But forget about that for now because we're still in the hole. We're lost in the fog. We are surrounded by so many options and routes we could take that we feel paralyzed and indecisive, and we're not giving any of them our full attention. So, what are our first steps out of there? As sort of an honorable mention, I'm going to suggest finding a mentor, because sometimes it really does help to get an outside perspective from somebody more experienced than you. If you're like me and just get tangled brains sometimes, I think it could be really helpful. Now, ideally, I think a mentor would help you discover and pursue what you want to do, rather than arbitrarily pointing you in some direction. So I really wasn't approaching that Chris Oatley mentorship opportunity with the healthiest mindset to begin with. But I think part of the reason it hit me so hard when it all fell through, aside from the embarrassment, was that I'd finally put words to the questions that had been swirling around my head with the expectation that I might get some answers, and instead I got nothing. Now, looking back, I don't think I would have been out of line to respond to that email by saying, "I'm really sorry it couldn't work out. I hope you find someone who's a better fit. Do you have any tips or advice for me where I'm at?" And he could have said yes or no, which would have been understandable either way because he was a very busy guy. And I will say right now that I'm not trying to badmouth Chris Oatley in any way, and that he's always been super passionate about helping other artists, and I honestly don't think he had any idea how I was reacting internally to the whole situation. But I was just too embarrassed at that point to even consider asking any favors. But I think I could have asked, and it would have been fine. Now, that was a bit of a unique situation, and I only have mentorship listed as an honorable mention because of the cost usually associated with something like that, which can be hundreds of dollars on the low end because it takes time and thought and effort for an artist to provide that sort of tailored help. However, if it's something you can afford or save up for, I do think getting some personalized feedback from someone who's been where you are can be extremely beneficial, and it's an expense that I intend to prioritize in the future. Moving on to steps that you can actually take by yourself, I'm going to suggest a few approaches that I plan on using going forward. Not too many, because I'm not trying to overwhelm you with choices again, but just enough for you to chew on, and most of these can actually be used in tandem with each other. The first suggestion is to find the easy win. And what I need you to do here is first make a list of all of those goals and dreams and projects and directions that you're angsting over. And I do recommend making an actual list because even just getting it all down in writing will make everything feel more manageable. And then you're going to take stock of what you already have. The materials you own, the art you've already produced, the skills you've amassed over the years. And you're going to go back down that list of goals and decide which of them fits best with what you already have. Now, I suggest this for a couple reasons. The first is that for me, the longer I spend working without achieving anything concrete, the more I begin to worry that maybe I'm not achieving anything, and maybe I never will achieve anything, and that's where the spiraling starts. So by starting with something that's easier to achieve because of what you've already done and what you already have, you're going to set yourself up for a quick win that you can use in the future to remind yourself that, yeah, I actually have done things before, and I will do them again. I also think that looking at what your past self has already done can clue your present self in to where your actual passions lie. Because for the most part, we tend to put the most work into things we actually find enjoyable. So for me, going down my list of assets, I have a really nice art printer that I got for Christmas 5 years ago. And I have my old Artist Alley set up from when I used to sell almost 10 years ago. And I have a label printer, and I have all these freaking envelopes. And I'm pretty decent now at digital art and environments and color theory, though of course there's still room to improve. And I have a lot of fan art, because that's actually my favorite thing to draw. And so for the past several years where I've been wandering aimlessly with no specific career goals in mind, I've mostly been drawing fan art. So I do want to look into wholesale and art fairs eventually, and I actually have a fairly complete children's book manuscript written already that I want to turn into a dummy one of these days. My current skills and assets and interests really do lend themselves towards starting an online shop and selling in artist alleys. So I'm going to allow myself to focus on that for now without feeling guilty about the things I'm not focusing on, because those will still be waiting for me to pick up later. The second suggestion I have is to look for the pleasure point and the pressure point. So what do I mean by this? Well, the pleasure point is whatever you're working on that feels so much like a guilty pleasure that you think maybe you shouldn't be doing that. For me, that's a personal project I've been working on lately called Skyview Valley, which is basically a Legend of Zelda AU set in a Stardew Valley-inspired universe. Shameless plug, I'll link to that below as well. But my dream for the project involves character design and storytelling and world building and even a comic element, and basically scratches all of these creative itches for me. But it also feels like a guilty pleasure because any time I spend working on that is time that could be spent opening the shop or doing something more quote-unquote marketable. Unfortunately, spending less time on the art that you find fun doesn't necessarily translate into more time spent on the art that you should, quotation marks, be doing. So the key is to find that pleasure point and then really look at how it might be benefiting you, and if necessary, maybe tweak it a little. For example, if you love drawing Genshin Impact, as an example, I've never played it, but people go crazy for it, then maybe you can use it to try out more interesting poses or color combinations, or maybe paint in a background if that's something you usually avoid. Now, I'm not suggesting that you turn your candy into vegetables, or worse, feel guilty when you draw something just for fun that isn't benefiting you enough, because then you'll just start to avoid that too. I would instead suggest approaching it with an air of playfulness and curiosity, and just see what happens and what you can do. And if what you really need at that moment is a confidence boost that comes from drawing within your comfort zone, then that serves its own purpose too. The pressure point, on the other hand, is a method of focusing your skill-building efforts, because I think we all have areas of art that we'd like to improve, and at least in my case, multiple areas. But if you're trying to figure out backgrounds and color theory and hands and Instagram and watercolor, then progress on any of those things is going to be slow. And eventually, if your perceived progress doesn't match the amount of effort you're putting out, you're going to burn out and give up. So the idea of the pressure point is that you're going to look for the one thing that's causing you the most pain in the art-making process. What's the most frustrating? What eats up the most time? What do you have to go back and fix over and over again, and even then you're not quite sure you got it right? Maybe you're struggling with same face syndrome and you want to work on portraits or character design. Maybe all your characters have their hands in their pockets because you hate drawing hands, or you're sick of drawing characters against the same blank background all the time. Or maybe you're early enough in your artistic journey that it's drawing in general that's causing you trouble and everything's coming out wonky, and you'd really benefit from one of those how to draw everything courses. If you really can't narrow it to just one, like absolutely can't, and you feel like you've already grasped the basics of drawing, then unless your goal is to become a background artist or landscape painter or something like that, I think learning to draw figures and characters is a good default place to start, both because it will just make things easier for you in the long run, and because it's a skill that takes so long to master. I got my degree in illustration and took figure drawing at least 5 times, and I've still identified figures and characters as my own personal pressure point. Though more specifically, I'm trying to work on drawing more dynamic poses with simplified but correct anatomy. But you're going to pick your pressure point, and you're going to work on it for a month. I can guarantee you that whatever you're trying to improve, there are all sorts of resources available, either for free like here on YouTube or super cheap. You could pay $30 for a month of Schoolism and have access to a course on color or environments by Nathan Fowkes, who is a master of color and environments. Again, using myself as an example, I paid for a QRBit's character drawing course, which is honestly a steal at $30. She recently posted excerpts of that course to her YouTube channel, so I'll link that down below. And yes, I do feel a little silly linking to people with vastly more subscribers than myself, as if I'm shouting them out or something, like, yeah, have you ever heard of Beyonce? But I'm trying to be really open with my resources, and anyway, it feels like the right thing to do. But you pick your pressure point, pick your plan of attack, and then you give it a month of focus before reevaluating. I guess if it's something relatively small, you could maybe give it 2 weeks, but in general, I think a month is good. And then at the end of the month, you get to reevaluate and either stay the course or pivot. For instance, maybe I've spent a month working on my figures and I still think there's work to be done, but a stronger pressure point has emerged where I really want to add some simple animations to my videos, but I don't know how. In that case, I could put my figure studies on hold and put 2 weeks towards learning the basics of After Effects before bouncing back to figures. Maybe I'm still more frustrated by my figure drawing skills than anything else, and I'm going to stay the course there. Or maybe I think I finally have a bit of a handle on those skills and I want to improve my value structure. The point is to pick a skill to learn or improve, give yourself enough time to make actual progress, and then make sure to reevaluate periodically. And I know that, depending on your personality, a lot of this is easier said than done. My own tendency is to try to do everything in a panicked haze, because time spent on one thing is by definition time not spent on something else. But I can promise you with all the wisdom that comes from experience that it just doesn't work out. The final suggestion I'll offer is to look at everything you're doing or want to do through the lens of balancing categories. So after going through this whole process of considering the pleasure point and the pressure point and finding the easy win, I've pared things down to opening my shop, working on Skyview Valley, and improving my figure skills. And I'm going to go ahead and add running my YouTube channel to that list, because it's another project I have going that I want to keep pursuing. If I had to fit these into categories, I think I would mark my online shop as income, Skyview Valley as passion, the figure course as education, and the YouTube channel as outreach. And for me, I think that's a good balance of categories, so I'm already pretty happy with that. But there's also some potential overlap between these categories. For instance, Skyview Valley, despite being my passion project, has also been incredibly educational. It's helped me experiment with different styles and new ways to use digital media, and I'm getting all sorts of opportunity to practice figure drawing and character design, which is part of why that's my current pressure point. It also has the potential to eventually dip into income. I've been posting my updates for free on Tumblr and soon Patreon, and to be very clear, I have no intention to change that. I want all of my main Skyview Valley content to be free and available at the same time for everyone. But what I might do eventually is offer a paid tier that gets monthly sketch pages or digital downloads, or maybe the ability to vote in polls for updates or submit sketch requests. And honestly, my ultimate goal is to turn it into a zine or a series of zines. So look for the categories, but also look for overlap between the categories. And if there's a project you're thinking about pursuing that checks multiple boxes at once, I'd put a little star on it. Because putting your effort into a project like that is like killing two birds with one stone. Wait, I can't use that expression, I'm drawing birds. It's like loving two birds with one hug. It's also worth noting that your ideal balance might look different from mine. If you're just starting out and still learning art itself, I wouldn't worry too much about income. It makes a lot more sense at that point to pad out your education category and focus on income later, if at all. Maybe you've put a lot of effort already into honing a specific style or product, so education can sit on the back burner for a bit while you focus on income and outreach. Maybe you're going through a patch of rough mental health and all you can manage is a single passion project, if that. That's okay. I have been there. No advice or template can be one size fits all, so look at what you want, look at what you need, look at the resources and time available to you, and make your plan of action from there. It's also quite probable that these projects you're pursuing won't look balanced day to day or even week to week. Certain things might take priority at certain times. For instance, I'm pushing hard right now to get my shop open, which you'll see a bit of when I get my shop launch vlog posted here soon. And so by necessity, other things are going to fall by the wayside for now. Once I've done what I need to there, I can pick them back up again. The point isn't to have all balls spinning at once. If you watch an actual juggler, they'll sometimes have one ball spinning, and then maybe 5, and then 3. The point is to know which balls you want to use to begin with. I hope that doesn't sound wrong. But if I had to choose just one thing to emphasize out of everything I've said in this video, it's this. There are no wrong choices, okay? There are no wrong choices. I've given a good chunk of advice here, but if you feel strongly that you want to do something that runs completely counter to everything I've just said, then go for it. You are going to get something out of it. There are no wrong choices, and on the other side of that coin, there are no perfect choices either. We are not machines who can perfectly optimize our actions at all times. We can only do our best. Or if not our best, then good enough. Or if not good enough, then something. And if you can't do something, then maybe you just need to rest. And giving yourself permission to take that rest guilt-free will make you more able to do something later. So to wrap all this up, I'm going to end this video by telling you about everything I did do over the past 7 years of little or scattered focus, because maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe you're stuck in that hole with the tangled mind, or you're in a phase of life where you don't have the energy or resources to do much of anything, or you're just vaguely guilty about the time that's passed you by that you think could have been spent better. If that's where you are now, then this might not provide you a lot of comfort in the current moment, because it's not a comfortable moment to be in. The human brain hates uncertainty. Still, I hope that eventually you can look back over this period of your life and realize that there was some value to it. I definitely spent good chunks of the past 7 years playing Zelda and Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley, and learned a lot about what I can personally handle when it comes to video games. I made it halfway through Inktober a few times, and though I never quite managed to finish a month, I also got much better at inking in environments, and produced a body of work that I'm turning into a line of products for my upcoming shop launch. I dabbled a bit in watercolor, I had a baby, I wrote 2 novel-length fanfictions, along with a handful of shorter stories, which I'm not going to link to down below. You can do your own internet sleuthing. And I learned that I can finish large projects eventually, and that I like story and connecting with people on a level that really impacts their life. And whatever I end up doing with art, I want to have that kind of impact. I took a class on how to write children's books and how to illustrate children's books, so if I ever do go down that road, I'll be much more prepared. I have 7 years of Christmas and birthday presents that I get to draw on now, including printers and paper and art supplies, and a capture card from the time that I thought maybe I wanted to stream Zelda games that I now get to use in an upcoming video. I learned more about my ADHD and started gathering strategies that I can attempt to imperfectly apply whenever I remember them. Time passed, life happened, and even though it never felt like I was making much progress and maybe I could have optimized my time a little better, looking back I can see that there was value not only in the moments of focus, but in the detours as well. that's where I'm going to leave you for now, with a handful of advice and a handful of birds. I will be taking my own advice here, so maybe in a future video I'll be able to let you know how that goes. If you're still here listening, thank you so much. Maybe comment with your favorite bird. Mine would be a robin, because I love seeing them at the end of winter and knowing that spring is just around the corner. And I hope to see you here again soon. Thanks for watching. Handful full of birds.